Hello, whoever is possibly joining us. This is the session of the Media Reform Issues and Stakeholders course on the 17th of February. And just a quick hello from all of us. We have a very special guest star who's going to start in 2 seconds. Yeah, and we going to know who he is for sure. Big letters. There we go.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks.
So.
Okay, great. And I think I can find my presentation from here.
Yeah, please go ahead.
No, is it getting from here?
No, that's from there. The presentation is from there. Let me see. Let's just escape that. This is Google Slides. Let's just, did it freeze? Let's just escape. Okay. Let me see. There we go. All righty. So while Tim was setting himself up, so the thing I wanted to highlight and say to you all is that when we work with media reform and media justice, I guess we need to work with what we feel comfortable. Some of us are radical. Some of us want to work on the margins. Some of us are more diplomatic and can handle conflict like that and want to work with consensus and collaboration. And I think both are needed. And because I really felt that kind of tension in the group, did you? Did you feel the same? Yeah. So I think both are needed. But now, Open Knowledge Finland.
Okay.
The new media reform issue, media justice issue.
Great. Yeah, hi everybody. From my behalf, my name is Teemu Ropponen. I'm from Open Knowledge Finland. So I thought that Minna kindly asked me to just talk generally about some of the things we are doing. I've had a quick glance at the interesting topics that you have, and I thought that there might be a few things that I will, aside from talking about open knowledge, open data in general, I thought that a couple of things that we might touch upon is the refugee crisis, or so-called crisis, depending on who's talking, and then personal data, my data, and how that is changing. But please do stop me at any time if there's particular things that you'd like to talk about. And I have, of course, have a couple words about open knowledge as a whole. I saw a logo somewhere on your webpage on the front, so maybe that has become familiar to you. We have what, about 30 minutes, 20 minutes?
You take all the time you need.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So first of all, about my background, so I'm now the director of Open Knowledge Finland. Originally not a media person like or media expert like you are or will be. IT guy, IT engineer by training. I've been in startups, corporations, working in the government, in the ministries, working abroad in NGOs, and now at Open Knowledge Finland. So I think that at least in that sense, within the last 15 years, I've been blessed to have perspectives from quite a few standpoints. Okay, so this is kind of like part of the thing. Maybe you have heard, especially the business talk, not just business, but especially there, we are talking all about this, how data is the new oil and data is everywhere, and data is coming and going, and it's like the biggest phenomenon. And we don't need to go into any of these numbers. Just realize that that is pretty much overhyped. Also as a driver of the economy and driver of services and driver of revolution XYZ, which is of course true to many extent as well. Not to undermine that. But the other thought that why talking about open data and data is interesting. It's a big topic. The Estonian president Ilves, in his address to the European Parliament, proposed a fifth freedom in the EU, the freedom of movement of data, and that's pretty heavy. So in addition to talking about data just for the sake of business or for commerce and so on, it is such a big thing to have data about us or data about the environment, data about whatever. It's such a big deal that that it should be even a fundamental right or fundamental freedom in the EU. And this was 2 weeks ago, and let's see how it's picking up. We are of course a little bit thought of it as a pretty big thing. I don't know, from a media perspective, does freedom of data sound too geeky to you or something like that? But let's see. Maybe we will touch upon that. Yeah, the other thing I wanted to talk about was open data and data in the context of the refugee crisis. And I might show one or two things related to that. And this is again the issue of public or big data, or data about yourself, about who you are, which I think pretty much all of us should be quite you know, it's the fact that our data is being used, or data about our behavior, that's probably a no-brainer and should be known to just about any one of us. But what does that really mean? That's also related to the president's discussion. So at least these topics I want to have a couple of words about. About Open Knowledge Finland, I'm really sorry, I have a couple of slides which are in Finnish, but I will highlight some of the key things here. First of all, Open Knowledge is an international network of NGOs operating in over 30 countries. Each country organizations are autonomous NGOs, and in some countries they are formed as foundations. In Finland we are a association, rekisteröity yhdistys. In Finland we are operating for the 4th year, and all in all the Open Knowledge Network, several thousand people. We've tried to, one of the original experiments, so to speak, was to not form a formal organization, to keep it as a network and refuse to organize in any kind of a legal way. But in practice, that's still a little bit difficult to do. If you want to make legal agreements about projects or about funding or about anything, really, you are tied with the reality that in practice you need to be a legal organization. But we are working with autonomous working groups that work in various sectors of the society. We are talking about open education, open science, open culture, open licenses, open democracy, which is referring to e-democracy and participation, a very fundamental bit for us. Open government data, open sustainability, and so on. So basically talking about digital openness in various sectors of the society. Yes, please.
What does open mean in this context? Like open to everyone and where?
Sure. Great, great. So we're talking about and I have some slide on that about open data and open knowledge. But when we talk about openness, well, first of all, we are talking about digital openness, which I think is probably even more vague of a term. Basically, we are talking about content which can be freely accessed and freely reused for different purposes. But also we are talking about open, like methodologies for open collaboration between organizations, for example. And this is when I'm talking about open democracy, referring to how can we get people to participate in political decision making, for example, with as little friction as possible, and with kind of not being tied to only selected people get to participate and so on. But that's a good question, and perhaps I'm a bit vague there. Open knowledge, open data, and openness in general are in many ways in the current government program in Finland. And here, we're talking about very general things like enhancing the accessibility of art and culture. And it's very much about art for everybody or culture for everybody. And I think the meaning there can be ranging from not just the content, but also how can people find it. But there are other things like for example, using open data, using our IT services and IT databases in such ways that new business can be spawned from that. Or we strengthen the right of the citizens to decide over their own data and how their data is transferred to other authorities or other businesses, which is then again going to vary from a kind of a broad perspective to your unique experience. Yeah, please.
Just a quick comment, especially those who can follow in Finnish, but I think since you're in Finland, you should know about this. It's very interesting that this is happening. It sounds wonderful. At the same time, and now we connect sort of media reform, media justice, and internet rights and data, open data movements, is that the Finnish broadcasting company, the public service broadcaster, is under is under scrutiny in a major way, and its sort of remit is being questioned, and one could argue in a sort of old school, mass media reformist discourse that, open culture and open art is, that was the role of Wiley. But it's just a side remark when we look at the historical development of these movements. Thank you.
I'm sure you've talked about the National Broadcasting Company a little bit. I always get puzzled that when they do too good of a job, they get criticized that, they're taking over the commercial stations. If they don't do a good enough job there, or they're too marginal, that's not right either. I think it's an impossible role forever. But they take that as an example, though. It's thank you for pointing that out. For example, the National Broadcasting Company, Yle, they have released all the videos that they have are available for reuse. Not for total remix. Unfortunately, they can't do that due to the copyright. But for example, probably many of you are using Yle Arena to watch some series or whatever. Now that Yle Arena does not work very well for Mac, for example. So there was a guy who in a contest that we run every year, he did a better version for Mac. Basically a new Arena player for Mac. Or if you wanted to do a science channel or a media reformist channel, or start curating your own weekly newsletters based on their content, you can do that now. So allowing that content to be reused, very, very important and interesting point.
That's great news, and that's great for researchers. That's a wonderful research tool too. Thank you for pointing that out.
Yes. Okay, so here's a few of the projects that we do. I'm definitely not going to get into any of these for the sake of time. But yeah, you asked about open knowledge and openness. I think here I'm talking more about open data. Again, a lousy, for some reason I could not find an English slide on this. We maintain also the definition of openness here in Finland. There's actually 11 criteria, but the 4 key ones, talking from open knowledge into open data, we're talking about stuff that's publicly available, that you have permission to reuse. It's in a machine-readable way and available for free. And this is really important that it's machine-readable, that sometimes, for example, we're talking about like PDFs, for example. They are not machine-readable. You cannot it's not easy to read. Machine-readable, we mean that you can easily create a piece of software that takes bits and pieces and uses them, puts them on a map or something like that. And I will have a couple of examples of that a little bit later. Okay, great. On a global scale, we are doing pretty good. There's a few of these barometers that test at which bits and pieces of data are available, be it weather forecasts or national statistics, and so on. So here is Finland's right now ranked number 5, and here are some topics. You probably cannot see this, but ones that we are having read in is for example, government spending, water quality for some reason, and the company register. So basically information about who owns the companies and so on. And that, for example, is one that's discussed at the moment, whether or not it should be available. Some of the things that are well off right now: election results, the government budget, things like this. Lots of location-based data. So traditionally, like maps and where things are is a kind of an easy open data that should be public. Somehow it's very intuitive that it's public. Oh, and the background, by the way, to this whole open data movement, especially in the US and Britain, the thought has been that many of these data systems or information systems we have, they're made with tax money. So it's obvious that the content in those systems should be available to citizens at no cost. So that has been traditionally the kind of ethos of why things should be open. Right now, there's more to it. We think that services will be better with open data. We can be more effective in the way we do services, and we can create more business. But originally, it's more of an ethical standpoint even. And of course, I'm sure, or I hope you are aware, this year we are celebrating the 250th anniversary of the Julkisuuslaki, the Public Information Act, originally from Sweden, Finland, which was basically very much about being able to ask the government about what's up, and the government having to say what's going on. Yeah, so talking about from a kind of a government or city perspective, there's just tons of things that the cities are providing. And again, sorry for the slide in Finnish, but just to point out a few: public transport, the decisions that the city council makes, where stuff is built, how land is used, energy, events in cities, where people live, culture, parking, things like this. So it's quite obvious. We have lots of data. Where are the parks? Where are the schools? What is the demography of our population? Things like that. So we are talking that can open data be used to make some of these services a little bit more effective. I think I will skip these slides a little bit. About our role in the scheme of things, I talked about, okay, this is open data and so on. What we try to do as an organization is work together with the public sector, with companies, and with enthusiasts to make things happen based on that data. So to create these new types of services, to get government or other data owners excited about the fact that their data could be used as a raw material to do all kinds of new interesting services. This picture, is not showing very well, is it? This picture from last year, from a huge hackathon we were co-organizing, where about 300 people were gathered together at the old Bruno building where they used to repair trains. Now they hack away and create new IT services. Yeah, I have a couple of examples. I still wanted to touch, since you mentioned the humanities and culture, and we're still talking about what is open data. So I mean, kind of an old or yeah, I guess an old school thinking is that with open data we are talking about maps, about positions of places. So where are things located? We are talking about quantitative data like statistics, budgets, weather data, these types of things. But nowadays, more and more, we are getting into open data, also meaning open culture, meaning images, artworks that can be reused, video that can be reused, and of course with the media, how the media is changing, it's also about user-generated content and how that can be open. And there we also have some interesting starts regarding companies opening their data. So the biggest Finnish online portal, Suomi24. How many of you have used Suomi24 ever? A few? I think it's mainly or only Finnish. But it reaches something like at least a quarter of the population every week, maybe even more. I don't remember the stats. But just last year they released all their discussions as open data. So in fact, you have 10 million discussion threads and 70 million comments that you can analyze and mine and so on to understand the collective mood of the nation on a topic, or perhaps understand that is there a flu epidemic going on, or whatever, based on those huge amounts of personal data.
And there's a humongous multi-million-dollar research project that started at our Faculty of Social Sciences. So I'm sure you'll hear in other courses about it. Just started at. It's already, it might have been my phone. My dad is having surgery right now, so maybe they just texted me. I'll take the data.
Yeah, that's what I was referring to when I was kind of disputing you a little bit, that the digital humanities is very early phases, but still something that we are pretty excited about, that analyzing not just current information, but also old digitized stuff. Like last year we did some hackathons. It was 100 years old newspapers, for example. And when IT guys and media analysts formed together into teams, they were analyzing that, all right, how are we talking about socialism back in the time of our Civil War? Or how are we talking about when light was, or the electric light bulb was discovered? What kind of analysis, what kind of hype was there in the technical newspapers back in that day? Okay, I have a couple of examples. Oh, I wanted to talk about also, open. So I've talked a lot about open data. We touched a little bit about openness in terms of participation. This is just one service we do, is a freedom of information request. And that's why I just wanted to bring it, because the freedom of information, like I said, goes back to 250 years. So we have this service, tietopyyntö.fi, where you can ask any government official anything. So for example, in Lapland, they some time ago, you might remember in the news that they shut the border, or they closed the border for people coming in by bikes. Anybody remember that? Some of the refugees or asylum seekers were coming in with the bikes. So I wrote to the border chiefs and said that, well, thank you for being so worried about the asylum seekers' health. Could you please tell me how many people have crossed the border by bike and how many people have been injured when crossing the border, because they were claiming that was the reason why they were not allowing the bikes anymore. And in 3 days, the border officials were really good. I was very impressed with that. According to law, you have 14 days to answer to whatever citizen request you make, or provide an excuse, if you will, or that if you are not answering that response. But anyway, we make that an e-service for that, just to make it easier for you to send in those requests. I don't know if you're aware of this freedom of information. Is that an obvious no-brainer to everybody, or no? So journalists use that a lot when they are finding out that what's going on with this, the Talvivaara mine, or what's going on with this hallintarekisteri, the stock ownership issues and so on. They ask the government for whatever memorandums and so on, and they have to reply, or then claim that it's national security issue. And basically finding the little what's there in the memorandums or what's not there or what's alluded to in the memorandums can help you get on track with whatever interesting case you've got. So for example, the stock ownership law, hallintarekisteri, that did not pass, and part of the reason was that some of the journalists were extensively and very wisely using the Freedom of Information Act to uncover some things, funny things that were going on. This is a topic that would be a 2-day topic in itself. Let's not get more into that. But some of the other cases, for example, I talked about budgets. So valtion budjetti.fi, statebudget.fi, provides a kind of a tree that's gone down. So a new kind of a version or visualization of the budget that you can find and zoom. Right now, the budget book by the government, it's 700 pages, yellow, thick book, awful to read, absolutely horrendous. So instead, you want to find here that, all right, how much are we spending on defense forces? Or what about that silly dog tax that everybody's arguing about? How small of an income is that? So basically, the thickness of a branch telling about how important, how big something is. Based on this, there was a budget game, budjettipeli. So you can play around with what if you raise taxes? What if you, the daycare costs? What if you charge parents this and this? Can you make a better budget, for example? So they made a game that uses the real budget and the real kind of models, how things affect each other. This one, I hope you can see a little bit of it. I would almost like to show it for real. I don't know if you have seen this.
Show it for real. And you can imagine, you've heard of data journalism. What, first, open data can do for journalists working, not only freedom of information or access to information in sort of formal legal way, but also just the kind of journalism that can be there. But especially in the UK, and not even in the UK, but I'd say especially in the US, when we talk about NGOs and we talk about sort of evidence-based policy making and trying to make an impact, knowledge is power and knowledge is a tool. So some other people can buy data, others can't. In terms of sort of lobbying for certain decision making. So that's where the sort of old school media reform again and open data come together also in that dimension. So what is this?
Okay, so here we have the flow towards Europe, which is basically a visualization of the migration crisis. Depending on whether or not you like to call it a crisis.
Yeah, I tried to turn off the lights there. I don't know what the other switches do. This would be super interesting to see a little bit. I'm not sure if this is somehow centrally controlled. Because this test turns on these lights.
Let me see if I can find.
Let me see if I can find something that. Okay, hey, look at me. There we go.
Okay, so basically based on open data from the UN, UNHCR, what is that? Office of the High Commissioner on Human Rights and Refugees. Yeah. So basically, we can see and analyze either a particular country or the whole situation. That where are people coming from and where are they going? Right there on the very top, you see a timeline. So that right now it's on last October, I think, or maybe that's June. But anyway, we can start to understand that where is this current wave of migration? Where are the people coming from and where are they going? And then zoom in here and let's say Iraq, for example. So where are the Iraqis going? right now. So this is very, very much about, and you can spend quite a bit of time just playing around with this. Yeah.
You want to share with us or?
Just that we have a lot. I'm from Hungary, so that's just like our country.
Right. There's 8,000 already there.
But then comes there are lots of Syrian and Iraqi refugees.
Well, I mean, so.
Yeah, we are just giving.
Yeah. So there we go. But you see right here that all right. So 19,000 people have left from Turkey. Yeah, that's an interesting point. I don't know if they have the stats for everything. But you get the point, and this is what we are talking about. Like you said, evidence-based based decision making. Cool. And I think especially when we are talking about these types of issues, similar ones would be, you know, the whole discussion, the hate speech, whatever controversial issues, getting discussion into more of a facts-based, or understanding something that's pretty complex in a way that you can somehow understand. Of course, in 1 minute or 2 minutes, we cannot really understand this, but if you play around a little bit, there's more to be found. We are working on this. So this was a project not done by us, but rather some guys were in our competition. But we are working with them now to provide tools now to the government to use something like this for their understanding of the situation. Okay, they did a similar one. You cannot see this very well. This is about the cost of displacement and internal displacement of people here. And again, one example of catastrophe where people are providing data, a platform called Ushahidi, originally developed in Kenya, used here in Nepal to report, for example, buildings that have demolished or people who have been injured or killed and so on. Okay, I have a couple more examples here on the slide. I don't think I will get into to all of these. Some of the very simplest open data-based apps are something like this, which is essentially, you know, the screens you see at the train stations, right? So get them on your mobile or get them on your PC. So instead of going to the station now, if it's snowing and if you think that the train might be late, instead of having to wait in the -20 weather, you're just looking at the real-time information from the railway station or from the railway systems to understand that what is actually the situation. A very kind of spot-on thing, but something that will save you time and money. For example, since I live downtown, I always like to use this Sporat.fi. So it's using real-time information from the trams, so that I can see exactly where the trams are at any given moment. So I will be reading my media reform article until the last possible moment. I know that it will take me 2 minutes from home to the stop, and I can see where it's at if I don't trust the schedule. Okay. So are you following me? Okay, I think I have taken a lot of time already. I'm sorry?
Not a lot of time at all.
Okay. All right. In that case, maybe let's spend a few minutes. I wanted to highlight that why. I mean, you can reason that yes, it's nice that when you publish budgets, somebody makes nice visualizations and people understand that better. Great, that's kind of a no-brainer. But then you have these whole totally kind of new things, new innovations like Ilkka, who is in our board. He made a few years ago this application called Blind Square, which uses basically a GPS that's pretty much there in every phone, and information that you get from the application Foursquare to provide audio input to those who are blind or sight impaired. And that's right now it's the world's most popular GPS-based tool for the sight impaired. In over 150 countries, they're using that. So combining again, and very much a kind of an open data thing is to combine data sets here, Foursquare and GPS and map information, combine that, synthesize that in some interesting way, and in this case, make it audio. And all of a sudden you have a tool for something. Probably when they were making GPS, they weren't thinking about the blind people very much. And I don't think Foursquare as such is really about a service for blind people. But all of a sudden somebody else, originally a hobbyist who likes to just invent things, makes something very interesting and useful. Yeah, about culture, just last week there was a huge opening from Finna. So 9 million different data articles, their metadata. I saw it, the Hack Your Heritage logo somewhere, so this was a picture from that. We had 100 people last week at Aalto Media Factory hacking away cultural stuff. Maybe if I can have a few words about my data, and then I will be on my way. So, like I mentioned in the beginning. Oh, any questions so far?
You mentioned those like open access to art and things to art. I know that there are organizations who are really for copyrights, for example, in music. Yeah. So are those organizations kind of against you?
Great question. Probably the answer is yes and no, because I mean, we've done a lot of work to try to get the government, first of all, and also museums and such, to license their whatever data they have or whatever documents they have with a Creative Commons or similar license. And a lot of them have done that. It's even in the public recommendation that stuff should be CC licensed whenever possible.
Quick question, do you remember that we talked about CC? Larry Lessig and the company, yeah.
Yeah, the interestingly, so a couple of those examples that I showed were from an open data competition that we organize every year. I've organized 7 times. And last year we had Teosto, which is the Finnish copyright agency. They were one of our partners. And they are not, right now, they are not really, maybe not for free use of music yet anyway, although they're under a lot of pressure and the business is changing, just like the media as a whole. All those copyright-based businesses are changing. But what kind of open data do they have? It's more about the metadata. So for example, they have data about what concerts, where were the concerts of last year? What songs were played by the artists at each of those, because all the artists, in order to get their copyright money, they have to provide reports. So then you can start making interesting analysis like, all right, so where is the rap scene? Where is the heavy metal scene? Or that do the heavy metal bands play different types of songs when they go up north? Or whatever, you can make much more interesting things, but those are some of the obvious ones. So I mean, it's even those ones who might be very opposed to having all of their data open still might have some data that would be interesting for them, and they would want that to get reused. One thing we are talking about was playlists, how much songs are played and when, what time at radio stations. Things like that could be open without opening the actual content.
You are kind of also compromising with them. You don't even ask them to get it. You are happy to have that kind of information, not songs itself.
Well, happy and happy. It's about. I mean, gradually they. I mean, for example, the Suomi 24 At first, they were thinking about opening the data only for researchers. And then kind of gradually they realized that actually the more that others build on top of their data, the more valuable their original package becomes, because that service now does not work without it. So it's kind of a new kind of business to them, but it's for sure they're not immediately, or they probably even could not do it even if they wanted, because they would get resistance from the musicians. So I mean, it's a gradual change, and of course we would like to see everything open right away, but it's not going to happen. And we are not by any means like anti-business either. It's just that probably business models are changing a lot. Yeah, a good question. Any other questions? They're still experimenting with that a little bit, so it's a little bit ambiguous. But basically, let's say that you want to make a national mood analyzer software, right? You can use their data, develop your national sentiment or mood analyzer, and commercialize it somewhere else, and don't need to ask them anything. But if you wanted to make that, you know, mood analyzer of Finland and make money out of that, and that is constantly using their data, then they would want a slice of that, which is kind of logical. But there are, for example, Twitter does not, it wants nothing to do with it. You can do whatever you like with the tweets and so on. They will not take their cut because they just see it as creating more and more value to them. But yeah, I would need to be real quick about this. So again, yeah, so we are quite aware that we are being tracked. Just the phones, they have 14 different sensors, or depending on your model, but you know, you've got your GPS and you've got your sound sensors and cameras and what have you. So all kinds of information is collected us all the time. And we're talking now about that, how could that kind of, you know, how many of us trust that data about us is being used in an ethical way? Yeah, everybody, right? Yeah, we trust the companies. They do nothing wrong ever. 80% of people think that, or don't trust large corporations. So we think that there's something that should and could be done about this, and hence the idea of my data, where people actually control their own data themselves. So yeah, we understand that our personal data is pretty much everywhere, and the value, I mean, companies are making money out of selling data about you to other companies. And right now it's estimated that by 2020 it's 1 trillion kind of incomprehensible amounts of money. How much is the value of business that's made out of that? So I mean, even you know, World Economic Forum is talking that the personal data is a kind of new type of an asset class, they call it. But these are some of the questions that we are asking. First of all the data that's collected, why are the companies making money and not you, as you're giving the data away? Or what about your privacy? Is it all gone? Or do we actually care about privacy? That's a different thing. Mark Zuckerberg, I think, called it an obsolete term. But especially in Europe, I think that we still like to think a bit differently. So yeah, the Ilves talk was very much about this, about the personal data also, and there's actually a new EU regulation, GDPR, General Data Protection regulation, that's saying that starting in a year or two, you have the right to ask any of the banks, any of the whatever organizations, give me my data, and they have to give it in a digital format. So it will make it much more easy for you to take your medical records from your, or take your X-rays from the dentist and take them to another dentist. And you know, right now that type of interoperability does not work. And they don't have to do that, and that's why you are tied into whatever services you are using. So that's what we are talking about when we are talking about my data, a model where you control that. Yes, I will let Helsinki City Department of Culture know what I listen to on Spotify, so that they can recommend me stuff at the library, and to let them perhaps give me some thoughts on some good concerts. I do not want H&M to know what I listen to, but instead to them I want to give the right to what kind of hobbies I have or something like that. But the idea is that you should be in charge, not the companies. So this topic is, like I mentioned, I don't know if you remember, is actually even on the government agenda, pushing for this, pushing for the right of people to control their own data. And we are just in the starting phases of organizing a conference. It will be a 1,000-person conference just after the summer. So if this topic of personal data is at all interesting to you, this is something you might want to follow. We actually had our launch event yesterday about this. Had some first guest speakers from Australia and France join us. So yeah, I think I will end it there. There's a couple of Ministry of Communications and Transport publications, if it is interesting, that we've done for them. But I think that's, I think I will close it there, and we can maybe have a quick word, and then I really need to run. Sorry if I'm overrunning like triple.
Our pleasure. Our pleasure. Any comments and questions at this point?
Lots of good ones so far. Yeah.
Are interested in taking the
Yes, actually, now that you mentioned it, I was kind of hoping that we would have had that in place already before, but like light green. Yeah. If, and by the way, if we have coursework and like works that we need to do for courses at the university, we'd be very interested in that type of collaboration.
And as you say that, we're actually going to be writing our policy briefs for you guys to have a client in mind.
Okay.
So you can take a look at how we see what you should know from our perspective.
Yeah, like I said, I'm an engineer. Please, tell us something we don't know.
By the way, are you working with the Mapping Digital Rights project? You know that we've launched just in November, where they're mapping digital, they're examining, I think, 20 biggest telecoms and platforms.
Mapping digital rights.
Mapping digital rights.
No,
Okay, I'll be in touch.
It doesn't ring a bell, but
it's the New America Foundation and Rebecca McKinnon who's talking about this. So she started to talk about the intermediary liability and then now they're mapping how the organizations are doing in terms of personal privacy and how that can be sort of, we're going to talk about that next time. So, but I'll be in touch because that might be of your interest also for the conference.
Sounds great. And for the conference, by the way, if anybody's interested, that needs a lot of volunteer work. So that's interesting. Definitely be in touch. And about the internship, otherwise, you can be in touch with me. We'll see. We had a couple of people ask about that. I'm kind of trying to make things happen, trying not to overpromise either.
But the conference is a fantastic opportunity, I think, to volunteer for.
Yeah. So we had a similar experience 4 years ago. We had it was on open data.
this time it's about my data. 4 years ago, we were on open data, and it was really a fantastic conference at what used to be, or still is, the University of Art and Design. Very, very much of an international vibe and bringing together a lot of businesses this time, because my data is shifting the IT business a lot, but also legal, media, hackers, activists, and public sector people. About half from Finland, half from abroad. So that would be really great. Anything else? Okay.
Hey, this is well deserved. Thank you so very much. We'll be in touch. You gave us a couple of broad topics that you're interested in, and many of us will be working on giving you sort of policy briefs about those topics, and then sort of narrow down to specific angles. But you'll get content from us. Now you also know who our client is. Great detail. And maybe we've started to see how sort of the old school media reform movement from ownership and content diversity actually is, you know, there's not old school and new school, it's all intertwined, it just has taken on different dimensions and layers. And, you know, technologists and engineers and journalists and you know, community organizers and whatnot, we're all in it together, which is, I think, fascinating.
You mentioned the data journalism. I'm just wondering if you are aware of that data journalism conference.
I'm not to tell us about, because I'm a kind of a, you know, don't live here, so.
There is a, it's like NODA 16, NODA 16.
Oh, okay.
I think it's exactly 2 months from now, or just around 2 months now, so end of April. But there's investigative journalism and data journalism and something else that might be of interest.
I'm going to look it up and I'm going to post it on the blog. So thank you so very much. It was a great pleasure.
Right,
and you'll hear from me for you. You'll get a million messages from me after this. Very good. But do you start to see, isn't it fascinating? You start to see sort of kind of the connections between these sort of seemingly very different strands of activism and principles. Let me see, put this one. There we go. Principles and sort of very different kinds of movements. I mean, clearly what Teemu does and the whole international network does is very different from a, I don't know, community radio station or a local newspaper, you know, produced by volunteers in a tiny village in Mexico, for instance. And yet at the same time, I mean, I just want to remind you, and it is important for us to talk about sort of the big things. It is about the idea of democracy and information and knowledge, both, and being cornerstones and access to knowledge. Now with open data, of course, those who analyze the knowledge and package it in some way are no longer only journalists, media makers, or even artists in a way. But you know, all of us are sort of data journalists. All of us are artists when we create something, and so the field has become bigger, and that's why I wanted to invite Teemu here to hear it from, as in Finnish we would say, from the horse's mouth, hevosen suusta. And next time in the virtual lecture, we're going to talk about even issues such as artificial intelligence, which is a very big thing right now, and then the Internet of Things and sensory revolution, which in a way seems so far from the sort of, let's go to the barricades and try to change the portrayal of women in news media. But yet it is a continuum of the fact that communication is power and information is power, and it's two ways. So it is power if we want to influence people and policymakers and those in power, and of course those who can communicate and have access to audiences, so to speak, they have power as well. If we have to listen to somebody, you know, then we do, and that person is powerful. Does that make sense, or am I mumbling? Be honest. Okay, nobody says anything. All right. However, now we get to again to the practicalities of things. Well, maybe first I want to ask you, if then, theory of change, if then, what do you think is the theory of change for open knowledge foundation, that sort of the network of open knowledge foundations and associations? If then, remember the theory, the basics theory of change is if something happens, then something happens. Well, how would you formulate open knowledge theory of change? I mean, it's not written anywhere, but what comes to your mind when you listen to them? Somebody say something. What are they advocating? What is their theory of change? How are they trying to make the world a better place?
If we open to the public data, people may decide to create new and make the world more convenient.
For instance, convenient, exactly, more just in the sense that you get to know about this and that and get to make better decisions. Yeah, absolutely. And the reason, of course, why I asked this has to do with your next assignment, or rather the final assignment, and now we're going through a couple of steps towards that. And that is that Open Knowledge Finland will be our client. So our sort of imaginary client, because they don't, in fact, have a particular specific case, which for us is good because we don't have to be data scientists or engineers or technologists. But we look at things from our sort of management, marketing, strategic communication, sociologists, anthropologists, sort of cultural critic point of view. And we'll write them a couple of policy briefs as our final assignment to inform, them about issues that are of interest to them, but from our perspective. And policy brief, of course, is a tool. We talked about sort of strategies and tactics is a tactic to package information so that it has some sort of a seeds of change. So whatever you know, whatever your knowledge is, you make recommendations. You might do that if you write an ordinary essay for a class. You might recommend future areas of study. I think at least when I was young, many years ago, and I was writing my thesis, it was almost required, or at least recommended, that at the end of my thesis you recommend further fields of study or further topics for study, something that you didn't cover but you discovered while doing your research, right? So, however, here the idea is to make very concrete action recommendations. Well, I mean, new research is also action, and that could be some of it, but also strategic recommendations or recommendations for other tactics. And so that's why we're doing this instead of a sort of a old school paper. But in many ways, in many ways, a policy brief is similar to a research paper in that it needs to have kind of a thesis and it needs to have good argumentation. Where it differs is that you are not writing to your peers or for the academic community. You are writing to a client. That client could be the Ministry of Communications, that client could be Open Knowledge Finland, that client could be, you want to write a policy brief that goes to journalists or to a general public. That's something that comes, let's say you have an NGO and you want to have a policy brief, so anybody who's wanted to know about things that your NGO represents, let's say, I mean, many NGOs have this at the moment. They write policy briefs that explain their stand on, let's say, migration or portrayal of women in the news, and policy brief, as I said, is for a client and it has a set of recommendations. So I actually wrote a four-page explanation of all of this. And I'm going to just quickly show you show you what it is. But how do you feel about an idea of writing something else than an academic essay? How do you feel about the idea of you have to force yourself to do some research and then make real life recommendations what to do?
It's really nice.
And okay, good. And don't feel, I mean, this is not, you're not gonna have fun with this. This is not, you know, go a little crazy. You don't need to, you don't need to sort of make super nuanced policy decisions for, the president or whatever. Have fun with it though, think about, even, think about it's almost like partly fiction in the sense that although you do background research and whatnot, you are allowed to recommend like big things or small things, whatever comes to mind. So don't be wary of like, oh, can I say this or so. You are the expert here, and you are commissioned by Open Knowledge Foundation Finland to do this. So a policy brief is a concise summary of a particular issue, the policy options to deal with, and some recommendations on the best option. So policy options to deal with. This is sort of a very formal way. Policy doesn't only mean official politics happening in the government, in the parliament, and in the ministries. Policy can be just also, policy means sort of the code of conduct, the way forward, the stance, the stance on something and the actions related to it, right? So for instance, a lot of companies have social media policies. This is something I'm actually dealing with in another course. So let's say there are many newspapers have social media policies regarding their journalists, kind of limiting as to what they can tweet or how they can be on Facebook or whether they can use their own names and whatnot. So that's a policy, right? Okay. I mean, maybe I'm being too simplistic, but I just want to make sure, because from the Finnish, when my native tongue is Finnish, of course, and policy to me always meant like policy, like governmental policy, law, regulation, something like this. But policy is kind of a code of conduct, right? And policy briefs, and this is also why I want to bring this assignment up, is becoming more and more popular, because more and more organizations have, as we talked about last time, have become stakeholders in media related issues. And anyway, the NGO sector, the non-governmental sector, non-profit sector, and sort of advocacy sector is becoming stronger and stronger, and especially in the field of media and communication technologies, because our lives are being mediatized, as they showed us. So it's important for you as future, and then you already are experts, but whatever you do in your life after this, you might end up having to write something like a policy brief, where you have to take your expertise and you have to express it to an audience that is not your academic audience, and you have to popularize it and you have to make recommendations. So this is probably something that you will encounter in real life. So your final paper is what I call an extended policy brief. And why I call it extended is that it's a little bit longer than, I would say, an average policy brief. Often briefs, especially if they are not for government, they are 1 page, 2 pages. They're almost like press releases, but with the recommendations. Or they can even be 70 pages long and include a lot of sort of research data in them. Yours will be somewhere in between. Yours will be evidence-based, so you will have to do a little bit of research. First of all, decide what your particular focus is. Teemu has given me some general things, but you can choose whatever focus you like. And as I write here, depending on your angle and whatever you want to focus on, you can be very sort of broad. You can, I want to support media, we should support open knowledge, we should support media literacy, and research shows that this is why, and research also shows that these might be the best ways. Or very specific, urgent need to support media literacy by funding workshops, the more specific your recommendation, of course, the more effective you can be in terms of action. But sometimes, let's say, you have to, let's say you approach policymakers, you're being part of a multi-stakeholder consultancy group, and you have to write a policy brief from your sort of media researcher expertise point of view. You can't necessarily say, well, you have to draft a law that says A, B, C, D, and E, but you have to put it more vaguely. Do you see what I mean? So depending on your audience, depending, of course, on the knowledge you have, you can be very specific or you can be more vague. So here are the specifics. We don't need to talk about that right now. But this is what a policy brief always includes. So basically, you have to be able to condense whatever fabulous research you do, and for this you probably don't do much original research, but you go and look at what's out there and you condense it and summarize it and whatnot. Even if you look at 100 sources, you have to be able to condense whatever you have to say in a maximum in a page. And this is also only 10 pages, including references and 1 page of summary. So in de facto, your brief will be something to 7 to 8 pages. But I mean, if you work in a team, I'll talk about that in a second. And here I'm telling you why we do this, of course, that I already said a million times. And here are some themes that Open Knowledge Foundation Finland would like to know about. Freedom of information, open government, hate speech and cyber violence even, and net neutrality. And these are, of course, huge things. And you can imagine, based on what Teemu said, talked about freedom of information and all of that they know quite a bit about this. So my suggestion is, find, for instance, an organization that already works, if you're interested in this, that already works on this, and see what they're doing. Or, find a particular case of hate speech and focus on, don't talk about hate speech in general, but focus on something. What you can also do, if you like, is not necessarily to study the topic of hate speech and write a policy brief and recommendation what Open Knowledge Finland could do in terms of hate speech, but for instance, look at organizations that have advocated against hate speech and maybe use data and open data to do so. So what are some good practices in terms of strategies and tactics? Does that make sense? Am I making sense? Then there's another option, and now I turn to our friend. If you're interested in journalism, there is yet another option. I don't have it written here because you'll explain it, but do you want to tell a couple of words about the other option of writing a different kind of policy brief?
Basically, what I want to do about this course for journalism, about exchange from Turkey to Finland is, I want to write something and do some research about how Finnish media and Turkish media cover news and how they are designing a newspaper and what's the content of what and the context of the news is. And I think about that with the Finnish newspaper here and three Turkish newspapers, so you can see the difference and you can make a policy brief about it. It will be good research, I guess, and that's it.
And as for your client or for whom, because it's important, of course, with the policy brief, who is your audience? What do they know? What kind of language do you need to use in the brief? Your audience would be journalists and a couple of NGOs, right? Yeah. So you have these choices, okay? I go back here and I quickly continue just because the instructions are here. But I just want to say that there are also, I love this. I love the simplest, more simple the formula the better. So you will have basically in this document that I'll link to our blog tonight, you will have steps to go through that you can think about when you have chosen your topic. So, oops. So basically, what problem? Who's the audience? And here are the very basic questions. What other policy or issue briefs already exist? That's a good idea also to sort of have an idea of a topic. Search organizations that work around it. Often, people or the organization publish these briefs. So try to see what people have already written about that, and see what you can use. This is basically the basic outline. And actually, I did a training with some Finnish researchers about this. So I wrote them this policy brief example, which is not like the most eloquent. I'm sorry, but yeah. And this is based on 2 big research efforts that were just concluded like a year ago about how scholars and policymakers can work together for better policy making. And so I wrote a very short executive summary. Then I introduced the problem. Why am I even writing about this? Very much this could be like a memo or almost like a news release. It has many sort of similar approaches. In a policy brief, you usually use, this is a detail, but you usually use footnotes or endnotes because usually your audiences are not academic, so you don't care, they don't care to read all this, dates and years and page numbers. So even this little detail is a little different. Then I tell the reader what my approach is, and my approach for this policy brief was to look at research that is done on best practices of scholar policymaker collaborations. So I didn't make up these recommendations that I summarized in the summary. I didn't make them up by myself, or they are not something that came, let's say, from a workshop. But this is like from big scale research projects. So I'm highlighting that, and I'm telling very shortly what this research was about and what the core models proposed were. And I also visualize. So that's something you can think about in terms of your policy brief, data visualization, or whatever, more visual, the better. And then conclusion and recommendations. Learn and understand the policymaking process, choose the right model of collaboration, sustain your relationship even if your research project is over. So those were my recommendations for scholars based on these research projects if they want to work with policymakers. 2 pages. Okay. So this was very brief. Do you feel you know what a policy brief is? Okay. I mean, it's not rocket science, but sometimes, and I know at least for me, sometimes you're trying to change your style when you're used to writing about research in a certain style. And for transparency, academic style is always very strict, right? It's tough. So, okay, that's clear. Then I want to give you like 10 minutes. In 2 minutes, I want to give you 10 minutes in case you want to work with somebody. So I have a way of how we can organize that, and I will in 2 seconds. And then by next week, after you sort of maybe find a partner you want to work it with, or you want to do it individually, it doesn't matter, or maybe you just want to exchange some info with somebody, although you will write different briefs. Next week, and this will be posted tonight. Okay, I have a password. Oops. There we go. I created this for you guys. It's a virtual sticky note board. It's super easy to use. So I basically want you to do what I did here. This is just an example, to post a note where you say, hey, this is what my policy brief will be about. So how you do it is you double click, no, not so difficult. Then a week from there, I want a draft abstract, or almost like a draft executive summary. It's 250 words, which is half a page. So where you can already like highlight what you think might be a couple of the key research you're going to use, or even maybe at least one recommendation. So, So here I write, in this policy brief, I will highlight the lessons I learned from 4 free press campaigns, and I will recommend 3 specific strategies. I mean, this is already pretty specific. So I would then write an executive summary and say, this policy brief covers these campaigns and the best practices where, Twitter campaign, blah, 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 meetup for media reform people and whatever. I'm making it up. And then the final brief is due on the 9th. And for that final brief, I want you to include at least sort of, let's say, I could imagine sort of, well, it's going to be sort of 7 to 8 pages, the body of it before the end notes. I can imagine that, I can imagine that there you explain the research a little bit more in detail, and sort of highlight it and elaborate on your 250 words significantly. Yes.
I just really think somehow clearly, but
I was hoping, quite frankly, that we would share the final briefs in Dropbox. Yeah. But if you have a really good idea and you want to do it in Finnish for your clients and so on and so forth.
yeah, I guess it doesn't matter, but yeah, for sure I can.
Okay, no, but that's a good question. Would you like to read? I was just kind of thinking we're open data here. Would you like to read others' policy briefs and check them out? Because I was thinking that everybody would actually upload them on Dropbox and just see and take a look. And you never know, next semester you might be doing research on something and you're like, hey, I remember one of the people in my course did this. I'm going to check out what they did in the policy brief. Anyway, okay, good. So what I would suggest, that people who want to work on journalism and want to work with, I think, go over there. Like over there, they move. Then we have issues that Open Knowledge Finland wants to know about. And I know these are super broad. And I wasn't so happy that these are so broad, but at least you get more freedom. So let's say freedom of information and open government. If you think that will be something you want to work on, you come in the middle, like in the front here, and you sit here. If you want to work on hate speech, cyber violence, those kind of issues, you could go back in the middle row, and net neutrality people will be this side on your right. I could never be like a gym teacher or something. Yeah.
If you pick one of those, you still like choose.
Yeah. You narrow it down. Your case is up to you. You can do a million things with hate speech. You could talk about net neutrality in Mexico or net neutrality as a concept. It's entirely up to you. But I want you to sort of see who's interested in what. So if you want to exchange information or even work together. Yeah. So you can write a brief even with however many people. You can write the brief. Then it just has to be a little longer, but it's in the instructions. So you add a couple of pages if you're 4 people writing the brief together. So journalism, right here, what did I say? Freedom of information, open government right in the front, hate speech, cyber violence in the back, net neutrality on your right, on my left. Net neutrality doesn't, everybody's leaving net neutrality, poor net neutrality. It's an important topic, but that's okay. Just a general, yes, just a general kind of topic. And if you want, you can just have a little conversation. Hi, my name is so and so. I want to work on this. Maybe we work on this together, or maybe separate. That doesn't matter. But at least you can exchange info and see if you want to write something together, or if you're allowed to work on your own too. But it's good to know who's doing what, and maybe exchange even emails and so. Introduce yourselves to one another. Nobody wants to do journalism because Atik would love somebody who knows Finnish. Also to do some translations. You want to do journalism? You. Perfect. Perfect. Huh? No, but I mean you're joining the group. You're joining the group. Nobody wants to do journalism because we would need somebody who can translate from Finnish to English. Unfortunately, we're such an international group. How could you come? Some Finnish news into English, yeah. Or what you could do, you could use the English language YLE and in English language Helsingin Sanomat, because they have pretty extensive coverage in English already. No, you don't want to do that. Oh, now you know, because they have pretty, and then that's the language of the, you know, it's not translated. This is how they sort of talk about it. So you could do that. Yeah, I'm going to show it to you. Okay. And everybody change, like maybe you can even change email addresses or something. And I will set up also Google Docs that you can find, and if you want to exchange information. So I urge you to sort of, you know, team freedom of information, open government, team hate speech, cyber violence, and team journalism. You can exchange info, and hey, does anybody know whatever, and, you know, so you can communicate through that. Is that all right? Perfect. So I'm going to show you. Now I shut up and you talk. Finally, right? Look. Oh, I don't know what it is. Yeah, of course, this is a commercial. And these are the two main news sources, really. Yeah, and then really they are the biggest, the public broadcaster and Hesari. So you're good. Excellent. Perfect. Ciao for now. I hope this was clear. Of course, you can always Skype. You can ask any questions at any point. By email, I'll be traveling for the next couple of days, but after that, I'll be constantly online. And I'll set up groups that you can join. The Google Doc groups, you can join any of the topics and get in touch with your classmates.